This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of multi-practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest has a really unique background that I'm excited to explore. He's a renowned optometrist, social entrepreneur, and global health advocate. He's the founder of VisionSpring, a pioneering social enterprise that has helped millions gain access to affordable glasses, generating over $1 billion in economic impact. He's also the author of Dare to Matter, a book of purpose-driven living. He's a managing partner at Farkas, Kassalow, Resnick, and Associates. Please welcome Dr. Jordan Kassalow. Jordan, welcome.
Thank you, Ankit. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear your story. And let's get into it. What was the most important thing that helped you grow your empire?
Let's say a strong base and a strong history, which we took and grew. My father and Dr. Paul Farkas in 1958 started our practice as a contact lens specialty practice. It was a practice that was focused on and exclusively provided the highest quality contact lens care available. And we have stuck to that script for over 65 years now. Although we've added other services and other products and services to our practice, contact lenses remain really at the center, the core of our offering, and we differentiate our practice by being the best contact lens practitioners in our marketplace.
Excellent. And I know one of the things that you and I discussed and we were talking about is a unique history there. So you brought it up, right? 1958. That is a rich tradition. Can you talk to me a little bit about the story from 1958 to now 2025?
Yeah, I'll hit on some of the highlights because it is a long story. I guess the first thing to touch upon is the fact that my father, Ted Kassalow, and his partner, Paul Farkas, had the insight or realization that contact lenses were going to be the future of optometry, or an important part of the future of optometry. In 1958, that wasn't really that apparent. And so when they told their friends and colleagues and professors that they were going to start a contact lens specialty practice and they were going to focus only on contact lenses, and not only do that, but do that in a professional office building setting, not a retail setting, people thought they were a bit crazy. Although they went and they tried to prove their naysayers wrong, they focused on the one kind of contact lens that was available at the time, which was a hard PMMA lens, and tried to do it better than anybody else. And they created edge designs that were thinner and more comfortable. They went around to all the ophthalmologists to make sure that they knew about their practice, and they really grew their practice on providing the most comfortable, most comprehensive lenses and most comprehensive contact lens fitting and care to aphakic patients, because at that time there weren't intraocular lenses. And so after cataract surgery, people needed aphakic lenses, and they provided those lenses. They also did something that was quite unique, because back in the 50s and early 60s, putting a foreign piece of plastic in your eye was not something that was really socially understood or accepted or normative. And so there was a lot of resistance. A lot of people failed because they were so freaked out by that idea of putting a hard piece of plastic in their eye. And so they did something very innovative, which was to learn Ericksonian hypnosis. And if you go back into the AOA journals, you'll see in the 60s, my father and Paul Farkas wrote articles about deploying hypnosis for contact lens fitting. And they had a much higher success rate than others because of that. They stayed innovative, and because they created the largest contact lens practice in the New York area at the time, when soft lenses became available and were coming in over from Europe, from Czechoslovakia, Bausch & Lomb used our practice as one of the primary sites, one of the first sites in America to bring soft lenses to the market. And so they were very well positioned to bring hard lens wearers into the soft lens market, and that grew the practice. Similarly, they were one of the first practices to deploy extended wear lenses in the late 70s. And then in the late 80s, when Vistakon developed the one-day lens, they used, again, a handful of practices across the country to determine how to best bring that product to market. And our office was one of those practices. And we had over 1,000 patients in Johnson & Johnson one-day contact lenses before they even came out into the marketplace. So by staying at the cutting edge of contact lens care from those periods right to this day, we have created a wonderful niche for ourselves in the New York marketplace.
Yeah, your dad and Dr. Farkas really were ahead of their time in terms of being able to understand and specialization, because specialization was not that popular back then, especially in the industry.
That's correct.
And you kept that tradition of specialization. And you have how many locations do you have now?
So we have 2 locations, one in Manhattan, right in the middle of Manhattan on 60th Street between Park and Madison Avenues. And then we have a practice in one of the suburbs of New York, Roslyn, Long Island.
And when you grew from 1 to 2, what did you experience that you may not have expected?
Well, we actually grew from 1 to 2, then to 3, and then back to 2.
Okay.
And so first practice that location was actually in the Bronx. The original founders of the practice were boys from the Bronx, and they started their practice on Fordham Avenue in the Bronx. And then they made their way to Manhattan. And so in the early years, they had a practice in the Bronx, they had a practice in Manhattan. And then they started a third practice in Rego Park, Queens. So at one point, there were 3 offices in 3 of the 5 boroughs of New York. The Bronx practice closed, I think it was sometime in the 70s. That area got a little bit dicey, and it was a hard place to continue their model. So they closed it, and then they had just the 2 locations. And then the Rego Park area also got a little bit rough to do business in, and so they moved from there to Roslyn, Long Island. And in terms of extra complexity of having different offices, it certainly is an issue in terms of managing the brand, managing the staff, managing the logistics of the 2 offices. But luckily we've always had multiple partners. My father and Paul were the original partners, but then they brought in Barry Farkas, who was Paul Farkas's nephew, who was the senior partner for many years at our office. And then they also brought me and Dr. Susan Resnick in back in the late 80s. And Sue works in both offices, the New York and the Roslyn office, and I've been focusing just on the New York office, like Dr. Farkas did as well. And we have other associates. So between the 2 offices, we have full coverage, but certainly there are some complexities from going from 1 to 2. But overall, we feel it's worthwhile.
Yeah. And, I think the podcast is called Optometrists Building Empires. And that kind of implies monetary and locations. But we've been talking to folks that have done other things. And you specifically have actually expanded, not necessarily in how much money you can make, but how many people you can help is what almost seems like with your nonprofit. Tell me a little bit about that shift and what made you kind of go that direction as you grew your presence in the field and your own quote unquote empire.
Yeah, well, ever since I was a student, I joined an organization called VOSH, Volunteer Optometric Services to Humanity. And in my first trip, I met a 7-year-old boy, and he was basically blind. He was a -20 diopter myope and didn't have access to glasses. And you can imagine he thought he was blind. His family thought he was blind. And when we looked at his eyes and realized that he wasn't blind, he just needed a -20 pair of eyeglasses. And I was the person who put that pair of glasses on his face for the first time, and he saw. It was a moment that really changed both of our lives. I gave him his vision, and he gave me my inspiration to do something bigger than just have a successful optometric practice. Um, I knew at that time if I could replicate that moment, I would be successful, no matter how many houses I might have or cars I might have. That moment had such a profound impact on that individual boy's life that I wanted to do more of that. And so after graduating, I felt that there were maybe better ways to go about doing this kind of work other than, having volunteer doctors spend a week here and there and provide people with used or lightly used eyeglasses. And so I moved to India, and I worked in southern India for a year under the tutelage of Dr. Kassalow, who was the founder of the Aravind Eye Hospital, which is now the largest eye hospital group in the world. And I learned from him what he calls compassionate capitalism, how to use business practices and principles to affect social change. And that as long as you provide people with goods and services that they value, they will pay what they can. They might not be able to pay what you want them to, but they can pay what they can. And so using that philosophy, I started a social enterprise called VisionSpring over 20 years ago to provide high quality, affordable glasses to people who earn between $1 and $4 a day across the world. And we started in India, and in the first year we sold about 800 pair of glasses. Then the next year it went to 8,000. Years later it was 80,000. Then it was 100. Then it was 800,000. And just to give you a sense of the scale we're at now, in 2024, we served 2.1 million people in that year alone. And we've reached a total of about 15 million people in dozens of countries across the world: India, Bangladesh, across North Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, Vietnam, and the list goes on. And so we built out a real significant sized organization. We have over 400 full-time staff. We have over 20,000 distributors. We call them our vision entrepreneurs. Think of Avon ladies, but instead of selling cosmetics, they're selling simple reading glasses. We also do prescription glasses. We have our own optical lab in India that can make over 20,000 glasses a month. And so that's a little bit about VisionSpring, and I can certainly tell you more about the journey, but that's a real quick overview.
I kind of want to talk about that a little bit because, part of the discussion is, what's interesting stories on scale. And that's a significant scale, right? Two offices, 3 offices. Yes, a lot of us have that experience. I don't think many people have the experience of serving 2 million patients in a year and having, what you say, 400 staff plus your distributors. That's a significant size. How did you start from like eight customers to 2.1 million? Like, what was that like? What grew it? Was it people? What contributed to the success there, do you think?
It was what contributed to the success is that vision is a really good product, and people need it across the world. And that we looked at vision not as an end to itself, but as an input into human capital development. And that in these societies, people have often so little. But if you provide them with a pair of glasses, a child can see to learn. And by learning, they can do better in their lives, and they're able to live up to their full potential. If you are an adult and you're 43 years old, and you're a weaver or tailor and artisan, and you start to become presbyopic, and you don't have eyeglasses to see properly, your productivity goes down, your quality of work goes down, and eventually you'll lose your livelihood. And so we have one program called See to Learn, which we go into schools and we provide school-age children with glasses. And then we have another program called See to Earn, where we help people who are needing their eyes to earn money. We go into factories where they have 20,000 factory workers. We go into tea plantations and coffee plantations and other places where people are using their eyes and hands to earn their living. We go into artisan communities. And so those are two of our big programs. And then we added a third a few years ago too, called C to Be Safe, where we work with companies that have large fleets of drivers. And we did some studies to show that many of those drivers were not driving legally in terms of their level of vision. And we go and we do mass screenings of drivers. We screened 300 drivers for Shell Oil over the last few years for India. And so we have these big partnerships with brands like Shell for road safety. We have partnerships with Target and West Elm and Levi Strauss in their factories to make sure they have we call a 2020 workforce. And we have nice relationships with ministries of education and other NGOs that are working on education to make sure that the boys and girls in those schools can see so they can learn. So a lot of our success, I think, is having a strategy that embeds vision into these larger social needs, which are education, livelihood development, and road traffic safety. And that really has helped us get on the agendas of these bigger organizations that have more resources to forward those agendas.
Okay. And how do lessons learned in running that kind of organization? Yes, it's nonprofit, but it's significant scope. What have you learned that helped you in your optometry practice, or vice versa? Like, what are the lessons that have been cross-pollinated?
Well, I think probably the most important pollination is culture. Is that in creating a team that feels that they are coming to work to provide a good for society and a good for the people that you're trying to serve. So in VisionSpring, we're trying to provide vision services to the poorest people in the world. In our practice, it's quite the opposite. We're trying to provide the highest quality vision services to people who have as many resources as is needed in order to provide the highest level of vision services. So they're sort of on almost polar opposites, but they both are served by a mission that says we want to provide the best services that we can, and we want to come to work every day to serve a sector of society with the best eye care that they can get in those marketplaces.
That's interesting. So you kind of learned how to service the patient differently and really understand the market there.
Yeah. It really comes down to listening to the patients, what they need, providing the products and services that they value. And then in terms of cross-fertilization, many of my patients have become some of our largest supporters of VisionSpring.
Interesting.
So even though VisionSpring has a revenue model, it only covers around 35% of the overall costs of the organization. So what I like to say is that the poorest people in the world are supporting about a third of our mission, and the richest people in the world through philanthropy and companies and others are providing 2/3 of our money from a philanthropic perspective to subsidize the amount of money that's needed in order to deliver those services on a fully loaded cost basis.
Yeah, and imagine, costs have been going up across the board, labor and globally. How
Yes.
are you dealing with it? Well, we'll tackle it both ways. How are you dealing with increasing costs for your offices as well as your nonprofit? I'm more curious. Let's start with the office first. How do you increasing labor costs, increasing or decreasing reimbursements? How are you all dealing with that?
Yeah, increased costs are a real challenge. Our largest level items of cost are our staff or human resources. Two is our products. Three is our rent, which in New York is sizable. And the fourth is our insurance. We have a policy, and we've had it since our founding. We provide 100% health benefits. So everybody who works in our office gets their health benefits paid by us. And as you can imagine, with often double-digit increases, it's harder and harder for us to do. So we try to, manage all of these rising costs by being as efficient as possible, to, really buying as smartly as possible, trying to control our inventory and our optical as much as possible, and then raising our fees as needed. And we've had to raise our fees in order to meet the costs of doing business. Again, luckily, we are in a marketplace where people can absorb that, but you have to continue to really make sure that you're providing services that are deeply differentiated and valued if you're going to keep raising your fees. So it's a combination of all of those. And the other thing is that we are in a very fortunate position is that we don't take any insurance. And so there's a lot of other practitioners, most practitioners are very much pressured with all these costs going up. And at the same time, these insurance companies are squeezing what they're able to charge. And that's a tough equation. We're not in that force field. We're able to set our prices and, again, deliver a quality of service that we tell our patients we can't provide this level of service if we were to take insurance. And so they understand that, and either they stick with us or they move to others who do take insurance so they can get a lower cost eye care somewhere else.
Yeah, that's interesting model because, like you said, it's how do you compete with people who have insurance and they want to stay? How do you do that? Why do people keep coming back to you all? I think you hinted to a couple of things. I heard you listen to the patient, you are specialized. What else do you do that really keeps patients coming back, even though you take no insurance?
Yeah. First off, I would say that we're lucky because we are in Midtown Manhattan and we're in a wealthy suburb of Manhattan. So this might be difficult for a lot of your listeners because they might be in geographic areas where they don't have that kind of patient base. But having said that, at the same time, I'm sure that those practitioners are not paying $35,000 a month in rent. And so, it might be easier than you think to charge and what you want to charge and not take insurance in any market. And the way that we do it is we have attracted for many years people who are interested and value excellence in service, in location, in the physical plant, in the staff that we have. A lot of our patients always comment that, well, your staff has been around. I've known XYZ person for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. We have some staff members who've been with us for 40 years, longer than I've been there. And so they like to see the consistency of the team. They like to, but I think at the very core of it is what happens in the magic of the exam room, where we have practitioners who are dedicated to their craft, who are excellent in providing optometric care, the highest level, and who has also access to the top subspecialists for those patients who need retinal surgery or corneal transplantation, advanced glaucoma services. We keep a stable, if you will, of colleagues who are the best in their field too. So they know that when we refer people, they're getting to the cream of the crop in those subspecialties too. So everything we do, we try to, convey a sense of excellence. And that's important if you're going to charge those kinds of fees.
Yeah. I appreciate you also acknowledging that, hey, it's, everyone has a little bit different situation. I think a lot of times we hear, not necessarily the guests on the show necessarily, but I know general business advice is like, oh, I did this, so you could do it too. right? And it's
Yeah,
like, well, no, there's a lot of nuances and differences, and it doesn't mean you can't do it, but you have to understand what's different about your situation and where you can pull the levers. Um,
I think that's great.
yeah, that's fantastic. So, what are you are most excited about the future of your practices, about optometry? Like, what really, looking out into the future, what do you see that's really like, okay, that's I like where we're going.
Well, I think for us, I'm excited about what we do at our core, which is continuing to provide contact lens services at the highest level. We constantly see innovation in our space. We're doing a lot of work now with scleral lenses, and those designs are just getting better and better. We're doing work with myopia control. I think that's an area that
Mhm.
is exciting for our organization, for our field in general. I think the whole field of myopia control, whether it's pharmacologically controlled or controlled with glasses and or contact lenses or a combination of all those, is a really huge opportunity for us. As you see the numbers just kind of spiraling out of control, as probably most of your listeners know, that places like Singapore already have 80 to 90% rates of myopia, and that's coming our way in the years to come. So I think that's a huge area uh, of work. Um, we've gotten more and more invested in management of dry eye, and I think again that's an area that's a big growth area as the
Yeah.
population ages, as the use of smartphones and computers become increasingly ubiquitous. Dry eye is unfortunately here to stay. And so, using some of the advanced technologies around dryness, dry eye treatment, uh, whether it's the tear care treatments or the LipiFlow or the IPL treatments or the pharmacological armamentarium that we have. I think there's more and more solutions for our patients around that. Um, so I think there's a bright future for optometry as we continue to get more medical. I still think that there's fantastic opportunity around contact lenses and glasses. The ophthalmic technologies to control myopia, the better progressive designs, some of these new innovative products for the management of migraines and even things like PTSD with these new filters and stuff. There's just a lot happening in our field, and so I think the opportunities are pretty limitless. So on the optometric side, I'm really interested in all of that. In On the other side of the planet where we're doing our work, um, I'm excited because when I started VisionSpring 20 plus years ago, there weren't too many organizations doing this work. And over the last 5 years, 10 years, particularly over the last 5 years, there's new major donors into the space. There's the World Health Organization has taken interest in this issue area. The World Bank has taken interest in this issue area. It's gotten onto the agendas of the larger foundations, some of the larger NGOs in the country. Um, and so through my work with another organization that I started called Alliance, we're mobilizing governments and multilateral institutions to get involved with this work. And so between VisionSpring Alliance and a lot of these groups that are doing this amazing work, I think we're going to potentially solve this billion-person problem. It's the largest disability in the world, uncorrected vision. I think we have a chance of solving that problem in the next generation.
That is exciting. That is really cool to hear. And again, appreciate all the work you do towards that. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
And so let's shift gears a little bit. I always like to get one story, a story that made Jordan Jordan. Give me something that anytime in your life that you felt was formative to you as a person. You kind of gave me a couple already, right? You gave me the one about the child that you helped and able to see start your nonprofit. Do you have another story that really says, you know what, this really formed me as a person?
Well, another story that comes to mind, if you're framing it that way, was in my journey as a young optometry student. I mentioned that boy in Mexico I met. The following year, I was in South America, in Colombia, and we were in the throes of seeing 2,000 people over the course of a week in the western part of Colombia, a state called Choco, which is the poorest state in Colombia. And this woman came and sat in front of me, and through a translation, she basically said she hasn't been able to see ever since she was a little girl. And she heard there was American eye doctors there. And so she canoed a full day downriver to come and visit us. And I examined her eyes, and she was like 8 diopter myope with about 4 diopters of oblique astigmatism in both eyes. So she was right. She couldn't see much at all.
Yeah.
And we went into our box of thousands of glasses, and kind of by a miracle, there was a pair that actually matched her prescription like pretty closely. And we put them on her face. She saw, and we were all very proud. Like, yeah, we saved another person's vision, and we celebrated for a few minutes, and then got back to work. A couple of days later, the same lady shows back up, and she said that when she got back to her village, everybody laughed at her because her glasses looked so funny and so ridiculous, really. And she was right, because the only pair of glasses that matched her prescription were these 1950 cat eye glasses with rhinestones on them. And this woman was dressed in traditional Choco Indian garb, and there she was with these funky eyeglasses from the 1950s that would work pretty well in the East Village of Manhattan, but certainly didn't work in Choco, South America.
Yeah.
And so we told her that, it was a miracle that we had a pair of glasses that even worked for her, and encouraged her to just, even just wear them in her house and stuff like that so she could see. And then she did something that kind of blew our minds. She took the glasses off, she put them on a wood table, and she went back into her canoe and canoed upriver without the glasses. And that really stopped me in my tracks, because what it fundamentally told me was that she chose blindness over what we were providing. And so it really made me reflect on, what are we doing wrong if someone's choosing blindness over what we're doing? And what it really told me was that vanity is not monopolized by rich people. And glasses and vision is more than just glasses and vision. It has to do with identity, and it has to do with a sense of pride. If you're going to put something on your face, you want to look good. You want to feel culturally in sync with people around you. And so it sort of flipped my thinking from sort of a charity perspective to say, there's really a market here. If we were taking a market-based approach, we would know pretty quickly whether or not people valued our services, because they would either buy our products and services or they wouldn't. Whereas when you give things away, you don't really know if you're providing any value, because you don't have the listening mechanism of the market, which is such a powerful listening mechanism. And so that's when I first came up with the idea of VisionSpring, to sort of say, let's charge people. Now, listen, they might only be able to afford $1 or $2 or $3, but at least let's charge them something so that they can put some skin in their games, and as importantly, they can provide us with feedback about what they value and what they like and what's appropriate for them, and that makes us better at what we do. So I would say that's another story that was very formative in my thinking, particularly around the starting and the ethos of VisionSpring.
That's actually a really good story too, because it's very true for even our patients in here stateside, right? It's sometimes like, oh, we have glasses, you have this, but really going down to that, hey, it's not just vision, it's also, hey, it's identity. You hit it on the head. That's actually spot on. And even like, hey, some people's identity is like, I like bare bones and simple. Some people's identity
Yeah.
is I need, and it's interesting. That lady, did she ever come back and get glasses? Or
No,
did you ever see her
she
again?
disappeared. I never saw her again.
Yeah, that's a shame. It's interesting because that's such a really telling story. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, Jordan, if you had to give yourself advice going back to your younger self when you're, let's say, for a few days out of graduating OD school, what advice would you give yourself?
The advice that I would give myself is that this field of optometry is only limited by your imagination, because we are providers, deliverers, ambassadors for the most important sense for 8 billion people around the world. And even though there are also ophthalmologists who have a very sort of different perspective of eye care and a different expertise of eye care, we are sort of the front people to provide those services. And that if you kind of honor what you really want to do with your career and you follow your own drummer, you can kind of do anything in optometry. And so you don't have to fit into a box. Like my work with VisionSpring and Alliance, there was no box there. There was no roadmap even for that work. I had to kind of create it by myself. But what was there was the most important sense to humans, and me being an expert in that sense and knowing what people needed. And so whether you work in middle of America or you work somewhere across the world, know that your field is an amazing field because the gift of sight is universally valued, and that you've got something to offer.
That's great. I think that's good insight. Very self-aware. So I appreciate you sharing that. And so let's if Jordan, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you? And we'll put some connection. We'll put some of this in the show notes as well. But where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Well, the easiest way to connect with me is by my email and my personal email. I'll give you my personal email. It's jkassalow, K-A-S-S and Sam, A-L-O-W @gmail.com. You can also reach me at jordan.kassalow @visionspring.org. You can check out VisionSpring. It's just visionspring.org. You can check out Alliance, EYELLIANCE.org. Those are the two organizations where that I've founded to do this work. You can also go to the website of my practice, eyewise.com. And my phone number at my practice, if people want to contact me or if they want to have any of their patients consult with us, if they're in the New York area, is 212-355-5145.
And we'll put all that in the show notes for you as well. So don't worry about it if you didn't catch any of that. You'll see in the show notes for those folks listening. So Jordan, thank you again for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I appreciate your time. I appreciate what you're doing. I think you're doing a nice service to the optometric profession, getting people to share some of their insights.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's the more I do this, the more interesting the stories get. It's like, oh wow, that's a really cool story. Like yours is such a really neat story. So I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you again to the audience. If you learned something today, laughed, or just enjoyed the podcast, please share the video if you're watching on YouTube or the podcast if you're listening, and subscribe. Thanks again, Jordan, for being on the show. And this has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. We'll see you next time. This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of multi-practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together.